That moment still plays over in my mind, and I can't seem to shake it. Sophia had gone to the restroom, leaving her phone on the table beside her glass of wine, which was barely half drunk. My stomach had been tied in knots for hours, a sickening feeling gnawing at me. My instincts were screaming that something was off, and I couldn't ignore it. I kept my eyes on them all night. Jackson leaning in close when she talked, his hand lingering on her back a bit too long. I was on edge, sitting there, gripping my glass of scotch so tightly that I honestly thought it might crack in my hand. They acted like no one was paying attention, but I saw everything. Every little thing. So when she stepped away, I did something that went completely against my character. I reached for her phone. My hands were shaking. Can you believe that? Me, the guy who breaks down legal arguments for a living. Trembling like some kid with his first crush. I didn't even know what I was hoping to find. Part of me was praying I wouldn't find anything at all, that I'd come across as just some paranoid idiot. I could laugh it off later, tell myself I was being ridiculous. But deep down, I already knew what I was going to see. I could feel it. I unlocked her phone. Yeah, I knew the passcode. We were married, for God's sake. My heart was hammering in my chest. I scrolled through her messages, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. Most of it was nothing, just her coworkers and a few friends chatting about whatever. But my breath was shallow, my eyes racing over each message, desperately hoping I wouldn't find anything to confirm my worst fears. And then there was a message from Jackson. Of all people. At first it seemed harmless. Can't wait to see you tonight, followed by a winking emoji. That's it. 7 words. 7 words that turned my world upside down. A text you could send to a friend, right? Except that damn wink. God, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. It wasn't some innocent message between friends. I could feel the weight behind it. Something more, something they were both trying to hide. My blood turned to ice as I stared at the screen, unable to move, unable to breathe. I kept scrolling, hoping to find something that would explain it away, something to convince myself I was overreacting. But the more I read, the worse it got. It wasn't obvious. They weren't dumb enough to send something explicit, but there was a layer there, something under the surface. Inside jokes, little flirty comments that only the two of them would understand. Things like, remember last time? Winky face, and I hope we find a better spot tonight. You didn't need to be a genius to figure out what they were implying. I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like the floor was giving way beneath me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, was crumbling like a sandcastle. You know that feeling in movies where time slows down, and the main character kind of has an out-of-body experience? That's exactly how it felt. My entire world was falling apart in slow motion, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I must have reread that message a dozen times, my mind trying to process what it meant. My heart was racing, my hands slick with sweat. The noise of the party around me seemed to fade away, and for a brief moment, I even thought about putting the phone back and pretending like I hadn't seen anything. Maybe I was just jumping to conclusions, right? Maybe this was all some big misunderstanding. But the gut-wrenching feeling in my stomach told me I was wrong. This wasn't innocent. This was betrayal, raw and unfiltered. And I was standing right at the edge, about to fall. Sophia came back from the restroom, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. She smiled, asked if I wanted another drink, acting like everything was fine. She had no idea that the illusion she'd built was about to come crashing down. I quickly shoved her phone back onto the table before she could see I'd been holding it, trying to act like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was a mess, ready to explode. I managed a forced smile, nodded, but my throat was tight. My mind was screaming at me to do something, say something, but I couldn't. Not yet. That was when I knew for sure that our marriage was hanging by a thread, and I had no idea how to fix it. Hell, I didn't even know if I wanted it anymore. I sat there, my heart thudding in my chest, watching her, knowing that from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same again. I needed more proof. As much as that stupid message gnawed at me, part of me still wished I was wrong. Maybe my mind was just running wild with paranoia and jealousy. Maybe it didn't mean what I thought it did. I tried telling myself that I was just overthinking everything, that maybe I was just paranoid. But deep down, I knew better. I knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. I had to see it for myself, to be absolutely certain. Because if I was going to confront Sophia and bring everything crashing down, I couldn't afford to be wrong. So, one evening, when Sophia said she had to work late, I decided I was going to follow her. Yeah, it sounds straight out of some cheesy detective flick. But desperate times, right? She'd been saying she had late nights at the office, big projects, meetings with clients, all that. I'd swallowed it for weeks, trying to be the understanding husband, the one who trusts his wife. But that night, I wasn't buying it anymore. I waited until she left, her heels clicking confidently down the driveway, her perfume hanging in the air like poison. I gave her a few minutes to get a head start before I grabbed my keys and followed. My heart was hammering in my chest as I kept a safe distance, making sure she wouldn't spot me. And of course, she wasn't headed to the office. That much was clear. Instead, she drove toward the city center, which set off alarm bells in my head. Why would she need to go downtown for work? After about 20 minutes, she pulled into a parking lot of a small hotel. You know the kind I mean. Cheap, quiet, off the beaten path. The kind of place where people go to disappear for a few hours. My stomach dropped as I parked a little further down the street, close enough to keep an eye on her, but far enough that she wouldn't spot me. I watched as she got out of the car, casually glancing around like she was making sure no one was watching. And then, right on cue, he showed up, Jackson, my best friend, walking toward her like he didn't have a care in the world. Like he wasn't about to meet my wife at some sleazy hotel. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. My chest felt tight, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as the scene unfolded in front of me. Like a nightmare I couldn't escape. They didn't waste any time. As soon as Jackson reached her, he wrapped his arm around her waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. He pulled her in close, and then, without hesitation, he leaned down and kissed her. Not a quick, guilty peck, but a slow, deliberate kiss. A kiss that screamed routine. The way they moved together, the way their bodies fit. It was obvious this wasn't the first time. No way. I sat there, watching my wife betray me, watching the woman I had loved for more than a decade fall into the arms of my best friend. My fucking brother. They stood there for what felt like forever, lost in each other, completely unaware that I was just yards away, watching every move. It was beyond humiliating. I felt like a damn fool. Like everything I'd ever believed in, every moment we'd shared, was a lie. And I was the idiot who had never seen it coming. The pain, it felt like a shark was biting into me with every passing second. But mixed with that pain, there was something else. Something darker. Something angrier. I was furious. No, angry didn't even begin to cover it. I was livid. But even as I watched them laughing quietly, walking toward the hotel entrance, I didn't lose control. I couldn't. Not yet. I wanted to storm out of the car and confront them, right there in that moment. I wanted to scream at them, punch Jackson in his smug face, and drag Sophia out by her hair. But that wouldn't have done any good. No, that would have been too easy for them. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I stayed in the car, silent and seething, every fiber of my being trembling with rage. I had a plan. I wasn't going to let them win. This wasn't going to be some pathetic story where the guy gets cheated on and just takes it. No way. I was going to make sure they paid for what they did. But I needed time. I needed to think. I needed to prepare. So, I stayed there, watching them disappear into the hotel, knowing exactly what was going to happen behind those walls. And instead of confronting them, I turned the car on and drove off. My revenge was starting to take shape in my mind. When it was all said and done, I knew it wouldn't be pretty. Revenge wasn't something you rush. I had to be smart about this, gather as much intel as I could before making my move. So, I became a shadow, always a step behind, but never letting them know I was there. I started by recording their phone calls. Sophia had become predictable, stepping outside to take her work calls whenever she thought I wasn't watching. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I installed a program on her phone, one I got from a tech-savvy client, something that would let me listen in on everything. I started following her on the nights she claimed she'd be working late, waiting for her to meet Jackson at one of their regular spots. The anger inside me was building, growing with each new piece of evidence I gathered. But I didn't let it overwhelm me. Not yet. I didn't just want to expose them. That would have been too easy. Sure, if I'd gone public and told everyone they were screwing behind my back, it would have caused a scandal, but eventually they would have moved on. They would have found a way to sweep it under the rug. No, I wanted them to feel the same humiliation, the same gut-wrenching pain that had been eating me alive since I first saw that text. They needed to suffer, and I was going to make sure they did. Then one day, I got an unexpected call. Maya, Dylan's wife. It had been weeks since we last spoke. She and Dylan had always seemed like the perfect couple, at least from the outside. If I was blindsided by Sophia's betrayal, I couldn't imagine the hell Maya must have been going through. But when she called, she was surprisingly calm. At first, I didn't think much of it. She made small talk, asked how I was doing, nothing out of the ordinary. But there was something in her voice, a subtle uncertainty, like she was trying to ask something without outright saying it. After a long pause, she finally came out with it. Ethan, I need to ask you something. Do you think Dylan might be seeing someone? Her voice cracked, just a little, enough to make my stomach turn. How the hell was I supposed to answer that? She had probably just started to suspect what was going on, but I already had the full picture. I couldn't just dump all that on her over the phone. So I stayed quiet for a moment, trying to figure out the best way to respond. She kept talking, like the silence was giving her permission to spill everything she'd been holding in. She told me how Dylan had been working late more often, how he'd been distant and distracted. She was starting to wonder if there was someone else, but she didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to be that wife, the one who jumps to conclusions without solid proof. But now, the pieces were falling into place, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I wanted to tell her the truth right then and there. I wanted to just come out and say it. Your husband is cheating, and he's doing it with my wife. But something held me back. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe I didn't want to see the look on her face when the truth hit her the way it hit me. So I just listened. I let her spill all her suspicions and fears, everything she'd been carrying around. And then she asked me the question that made my heart stop. Ethan, she said, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper, do you suspect something? Her words hung in the air like a weight, and I knew I couldn't lie to her. Not anymore. I had been holding on to this secret for too long, and it was eating me alive. So, you know that, even though she couldn't see me over the phone, I could feel the heaviness in my chest as I spoke. Yeah, Maya, I do. There was a pause, and I could almost hear her mind working, the pieces falling into place. But instead of breaking down, like I half expected her to, she stayed quiet for a moment. Then, she said something I wasn't ready for. Let's meet. The next day, we met at a small cafe, one of those quiet places where no one really pays attention. I got there first, and when she walked in, I barely recognized her. Maya had always been so composed, always put together, but now, she looked different, tired, like the life had been sucked out of her. She sat down across from me, avoiding eye contact, nervously stirring her coffee as if she could find the answers to all her questions at the bottom of the cup. Neither of us knew where to begin, so we just sat there, the air between us thick with tension. The silence stretched on, uncomfortable and heavy, like we were both afraid to speak first. Finally, Maya broke the stillness, her voice soft, but filled with a quiet ache. He's been different, Ethan. Coming home late, always making excuses. It's like he's a ghost in our house, and I'm left wondering if he's even still here at all. I could feel the weight of her words, and I sat there, gripping the edge of the table, unsure how to respond. How do you tell someone their entire life is about to come crashing down? I wanted to protect her, to shield her from the truth. But I knew I couldn't keep lying to her forever. When she looked at me, her eyes searching mine, and asked, "Do you think he's seeing someone?" I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I think he is," I said, my voice trembling slightly, betraying the weight of the moment. "And I think it's with Sophia." Her face changed instantly, the sadness shifting into something harder, something colder. But she didn't crumble. She didn't fall apart. Instead, her expression sharpened, her gaze more focused, more resolved. I hadn't expected that. She leaned forward, her voice low but determined. "Then let's make them pay." Her words hit me like a slap, but they also lit a fire inside me. This wasn't about seeking sympathy. This wasn't about feeling sorry for ourselves. She wanted revenge, and for the first time since everything fell apart, I realized I wasn't alone. We were in this together. In that moment, we were no longer victims. We were partners, united by betrayal, and we would take back control. I nodded, already forming a plan in my mind, my focus sharpening. We were going to make Dylan and Sophia regret every moment. They wouldn't know what hit them. From that night on, Maya and I met more often. At first, it was about plotting, making sure we could catch them red-handed. But something else started to take root between us, something unspoken. We were both broken, pieces of ourselves scattered by the lies of the people we trusted most. And somehow, in our shared pain, we found a quiet understanding. She got it. She understood what I was going through in a way no one else could. We spent hours talking, venting, strategizing. She'd unload about Dylan, and I'd let the anger spill out about Sophia. But there was always an undercurrent, something unspoken, something electric between us, waiting for the right moment to snap. One evening, Maya came over to my place. It was becoming routine, dinners, late-night conversations, planning. But that night, something felt different. I had cooked dinner, something simple, but I couldn't focus on it. The air between us was thick, charged. We talked about our spouses, about how we'd make them pay, about how we'd expose them. But there was something more in the silence that lingered after the words stopped. She looked stunning. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes, which were usually clouded with pain, now seemed to sparkle with something fierce, something untamed. She wore a simple black dress, nothing fancy, but it hugged her figure in a way that made it hard for me to look away. I tried to focus on what we were saying, on our plan, but my attention kept slipping, drawn to the curve of her neck, the way her lips moved. After dinner, we didn't rush to get up. We stayed seated, the silence between us no longer uncomfortable, but charged, like the moment before a storm. I could feel her eyes on me, and when I finally looked up, I found her gaze locked on mine. It was like everything else faded into the background, and in that moment, all I could see was her. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice almost a breath. "We're just as much cheaters as they are." The words hit me like a gut punch, and I realized then this wasn't just about revenge. She wasn't just angry at her husband. We were both caught in the same storm, both drowning in betrayal. But before I could respond, she continued, her hand moving to my shoulder, her touch sending a jolt through me. "I can't keep pretending. I can't keep this inside anymore." Her hand lingered on my skin, warm and electric, and I felt a pull, something deep inside urging me forward. We both knew what was happening. We both knew what we were about to do. A small part of me fought it. A part of me wanted to stop, to pull away before everything went too far. But another part of me, one that had been dormant for too long, was drawing me toward her. The anger, the pain, the betrayal. It was all too much, and in that moment, she was the only one who truly understood. I leaned in, our faces only inches apart, and before I could think twice, our lips collided in a kiss that was fierce, desperate. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was raw, hungry, like we were trying to fill the emptiness inside each other. Her lips were soft, her breath unsteady, and as I pulled her closer, I felt the tension in her body melt. There was no turning back now. We didn't stop. I grabbed her by the waist, pulling her onto my lap, and she responded instantly, her hands tangling in my hair, pulling me closer, needing more. We stumbled to the couch, bodies pressed together in a messy, desperate tangle of limbs. It wasn't just sex. It was an explosion of everything we'd been holding in. Our pain, our anger, our shattered trust. And it felt like we were both trying to escape the mess our lives had become. Her dress slipped off easily, and soon we were tangled together, moving with a frantic urgency that surprised me. It wasn't just about the physical release. It was about reclaiming something we had lost, something our spouses had taken from us. Her moans filled the room, and we moved from the couch to the floor, then to the bedroom, and even to the bathroom. Neither of us was willing to stop. Neither of us willing to let go of the high of losing ourselves in each other. even if it was only for a few hours. The sex was wild, chaotic, a storm of emotions and desire. We were two people trying to outrun the pain, using each other as an escape from the wreckage of our lives. For those few hours, everything else faded away. I wasn't thinking about Sophia or Dylan. I wasn't fixated on revenge or the betrayal that had gutted me. I was focused on Haley, her body, her warmth, the sound of her breathless moans in my ear. But when the heat of the moment passed, and I lay there afterward, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on me like a boulder. Haley was asleep beside me, her body curled against mine. But I couldn't shut my eyes. The truth was eating at me, gnawing away at my gut. I had betrayed Sophia, sure, but more than that, I had betrayed myself. I had crossed a line, given in to something I hated. I had become part of the mess I had sworn to never be a part of. I had stooped to their level. No amount of revenge would ever make me feel better about that. After that night with Haley, everything felt different. It wasn't just the physical act. It was the realization that I had crossed a moral line. I had allowed myself to slip into something I could never take back. The floodgates opened, and all the anger, betrayal, and despair that had been building up for so long came rushing out. Haley and I continued seeing each other, but now there was an underlying tension between us, a constant fear that we'd get caught, that this would all come crashing down. The passion between us was undeniable, but so was the anxiety. We were playing with fire, and we both knew it. But despite everything, she was the one person who truly understood me. With Haley, I didn't have to hide behind the mask of the successful, put-together lawyer. She saw right through it, and as much as we tried to stick to our plan, to expose Dylan and Sophia and get revenge, the lines between our original mission and our own emotions kept blurring. The more we met, the more the tension between us grew. Our conversations were laced with guilt, our meetings charged with a mixture of passion and something darker. But even then, we couldn't pull away. We were both too deep into this mess. Meanwhile, things with Sophia were slipping further and further. We barely spoke anymore, and when we did, it felt like I was talking to a stranger. The warmth, the connection that once made us work as a couple had vanished. Our conversations were dry, clinical, like two people forced to share a space but with nothing left to say. I couldn't take it anymore. I was done playing the role of the oblivious husband. I had seen enough, heard enough, and felt too much. I wasn't going to be the one to walk away looking defeated, though. No. After everything I had uncovered about her affair with Dylan, I was ready to take control. If anyone was going to leave with their dignity intact, it was going to be me. I had to act fast. I had to be ruthless. And then the call came that changed everything. It was my private investigator. After weeks of following them, he had finally delivered the one thing that would make everything clear. Evidence. Real, undeniable evidence. He handed me a folder thick with photos, videos, and screenshots of their conversations. There they were, Sophia and Dylan, caught red-handed at that hotel. Everything I needed to not only confront Sophia, but to crush her in court. I wasn't going to play fair. I wasn't about to start now. When I got that folder, everything inside me shifted. I had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the chance to turn the tables, to take control. I wasn't going to let Sophia continue to manipulate the situation. This was my move now. That evening, I decided to set the stage. I made dinner. Nothing extravagant, just enough to make it seem like a regular night. I poured wine, lit candles, and waited. I had to stay calm, make it look like everything was fine. When Sophia came home, she was already suspicious. I could see it in the way she hesitated at the door, how her eyes scanned the room, like she was trying to figure out what was going on. But she sat down anyway, took a sip of wine, and forced a smile. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. I watched her grip her wine glass a little tighter, her fingers tense. I started slow, easy, almost like nothing was wrong. I didn't want her to see what was coming. But the moment she started with her excuses, trying to justify her late nights, trying to pretend everything was still fine, that's when I pulled out the photos. One by one, I laid them out on the table in front of her. Sophia and Dylan standing too close together in that hotel parking lot. A photo of them holding hands, laughing like they had no care in the world. The last photo was the final nail in the coffin, a shot of them kissing outside the hotel. Sophia's face drained of color as she stared at the pictures, her hands trembling. Her voice cracked as she finally shouted, "How could you do this?" The mixture of fear and anger was clear in her words, but there was no guilt in her eyes. She was more shocked to be caught than anything else. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just stared at her coldly, my words cutting through the air like ice. "You're the one who betrayed us, Sophia. Not me." I let that sink in, watching her absorb the weight of my words. "I'm filing for divorce. And by the way, I've already spoken to my lawyer." That last line hit her like a freight train. She had never expected me to be the one holding the cards. She had always assumed she could manipulate the situation, maybe even turn the tables on me. But now, she was realizing just how wrong she had been. I wasn't the naive husband she thought she could play. I had the evidence, the leverage, and the upper hand. She sat there, stunned, her eyes darting between the photos and me, trying to figure out what her next move could be. But it was too late. I had already taken the first step, and there was no going back. The next day, I filed for divorce. I had all the evidence I needed, and I hired one of the best divorce lawyers in the city. Someone relentless, someone who wouldn't stop until I got everything I wanted. Our goal was clear: make sure Sophia walked away with nothing. I demanded half of everything, our joint assets, the house, the cars, everything we had built together. But more than that, I made sure I positioned myself to take financial control. I wasn't just going to walk away from this. I was going to win. Once the papers were filed, things began to move faster than I anticipated. Sophia, who had hoped to save her reputation, was left scrambling. But it was too late for her to clean up the mess. News of her affair with Dylan spread like wildfire, and she lost several important work contracts. Clients she had once relied on cut ties with her, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. She was drowning in the mess she had made, and the harder she tried to swim, the deeper she sank. And Dylan? That smug bastard thought he could slink away without consequences. He was wrong. Maya made sure of that. She had been quiet at first, letting me take the lead with Sophia. But once I filed for divorce, Maya moved in for the kill. She didn't just file for divorce. She made sure her testimony was devastating. She exposed Dylan's affair, his neglect, and his shady business dealings. Her words cut him down, both personally and professionally. But Maya and I weren't done. We teamed up in ways Dylan never saw coming. While he was distracted with the fallout from his personal life, I went after his business. I struck deals with some of his key clients, the ones who saw what was happening and knew Dylan's empire was falling apart. They didn't hesitate. They switched to me, and I made sure they knew I was in control. Soon enough, Dylan's business was in free fall. He was losing money, contracts, and facing lawsuits. There was no escape for him. He thought he could walk away unscathed, but Maya and I made sure he didn't. Watching Dylan crumble, both personally and professionally, gave me a sense of satisfaction I hadn't expected. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because it proved I had come out on top. I hadn't let him or Sophia break me. I had taken control of my life, and I made sure they paid for what they did. But a few weeks later, Maya and I met again. This time, though, it wasn't about revenge or celebrating small victories. It was different. We had become something more than just partners in this twisted game. We had become close, really close. Our meetings no longer had that raw, angry passion. There was something deeper between us now. The sex changed too. It wasn't just wild and reckless. It became emotional. It felt like the beginning of something real. Maya understood me in a way no one else ever had. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had someone by my side who truly got me. Months passed, and the divorce was finalized. I walked away with the house, a substantial portion of the assets, and full control of the business I had once shared with Dylan. Sophia was left with nothing. She tried to rebuild her life, but without me as her safety net, she struggled. Her betrayal had cost her more than just our marriage. It had cost her everything. As for Dylan, well, he wasn't doing much better. Maya left him, and with the debts piling up and his reputation in tatters, he drowned in the gossip that consumed him. His life had fallen apart, and there was no one left to help him pick up the pieces. Maya and I, on the other hand, didn't have to hide anymore. Our relationship went public, and we didn't care what people thought. We had survived the storm, and now we were building something real. We weren't just two broken people seeking revenge anymore. We had won, both of us, and we were ready to move forward, leaving Sophia and Dylan in the dust. As I stood there, looking at everything I had gained, my freedom, my business, my future with Maya, I felt nothing but victory. I had played the game coldly, calculating every move. And the best part? I didn't regret a single decision.